Hello, this is CrazyMan7777 here with the T26, the BT2, and the AT1, which I will be playing in that order, for a new strategy guide for the Soviet tanks and impressions. This is going to be a little different format since I'm doing 3 tanks, and also the tanks don't have very much information. Basically what I'm going to be doing is that I'm just going to be telling you how it is for each of these tanks, and if not there is a strategy, I will tell you. And I will tell you that strategy if there is. So if you guys want to see the lines that I currently have available for me for the Xbox 360 version of World Tanks, you can just pause or pay attention to this section right here. So the Soviet tank lines, which we only have 3 of right now, they have a lot of crap in them, as in not good things, which you will see. There are a few good ones, thinking KV2, IS-3, KV-1, stuff like that. But the Russians are not very good at armor or penetration. However, they are very good at destroying things with large amounts of damage. Now, like I said before, they have barely any penetration, which pretty much makes the fact that they do a lot of damage completely useless. But if you are a very good strategist, you can play these tanks well. So, the T26. The hull is pretty much completely useless. The turret is amazing, like most Soviet tanks, which hopefully you guys will see later on when I do other Soviet tanks. And the Soviet tanks can actually take quite a bit of damage, more than I thought. Pretty much the only problem with them is that when you're playing them, it's not usually very fun. Especially this tank in particular. This tank does no damage, or at least barely, and it does no penetration, as you can see here. I can get kills stolen from me pretty easily if there's someone pretty smart with T2 medium or a PZ2 or a PZ2G or something like that. The Soviet tanks at this tier are pretty easily outmatched by other tanks, which are actually at this point still in the same time period, which is kind of scary for the Soviets. But of course, at this tier, we're only within post-war / right at the beginning of World War II tanks. And that's pretty much it for the T26. No strategy there. Here is the BT2. The BT2 actually does have strategy, and since it does, I believe that it was actually used in the war. Usually the ones with strategy have been used in the war, but I could possibly be wrong about that. I am going to look and see about if this one was in the war. And it was. Okay. The AT1 was not, and the T26 was. So I can see now why the comments from the Germans were necessary about these tanks, because they pretty much thought that these tanks were pretty flimsy pieces of crap, which, you know, pretty true, pretty true. The good thing, though, is that the BT2 is probably the better of the 3 that I will be showing you here. It does have good turret armor, like normal Soviet tanks, and it has frontal armor, you know. It's different for Tier 2, I know, but whatever. The only problem is that for a Tier 2, it is pretty darn big, and it leaves a pretty darn big silhouette. So you will be shot quite a few times in the butt with this tank in particular. The good thing, though, is that this tank actually has pretty good penetration, pretty good aiming, pretty good damage for a light tank, and let me think. really good speed. Like, the speed is almost a tier 9 if you want to upgrade it entirely. No, actually, it's almost a tier 9. If you want to upgrade it entirely, then it's tier 10. And that is pretty much it for the BT2. The BT2 does not have any strategy whatsoever other than possibly rushing and regular light tank strategy, which is pretty much nothing. Other than spotting. The AT1, I will hope that if you ever play this tank, you will spot or stay very far back, because this tank is basically like a T-18 without armor, which it is pretty much based off of T-18, as you can see from design. At this point in the war, the Soviets were copying a lot of designs, and most of the experimental tanks that they had that they never made were copy designs, which did not work whatsoever. As far as I know, the AT-1 only had 8 prototypes, and you could see why. The fact that it's a T-18 with no armor makes it that it does have a good gun, but its turret degree sucks, and its armor, let's just say that there's no expectations that you need for armor in this tank. You will be destroyed within 5 seconds if you go out in the battlefield, which you will see. Not exactly 5 seconds, but you know what I mean. Pretty quickly, compared to most tanks. That being said, the T-18 does actually have a pretty good 76mm, which this tank does have. And, it is a pretty exciting tank. And just kidding, it's the opposite. It's probably one of the most boring tanks I've ever played, since it is nearly impossible to go up to enemies and actually try to do anything. So, impressions on the Soviet tanks as of now, I can see why most of these were probably not used in the war, and it's a good thing the Soviets actually had a pact to not fight with the Germans, because honestly these things would die immediately. Until obviously a point where the Soviets actually had good tanks like the T-34 and the KB-1. So that's pretty much it. I will talk more about these guys later in higher tiers.